Hello and welcome to this episode of Al's Garage. This is a special video because we are going to do a walk around and drive of this Jeep, which is my own personal vehicle. It's a 1942 Willys MB, and if you've watched some of the videos on this channel, the Jeep that you saw me fix up was a 1943 Willys MB with the hard top that I did for a guy in our local military vehicle club. So this one is my own personal Jeep, and as I mentioned, a 1942 Willys MB. And what's special about this vehicle is it is called a slat grill. So the first 25, almost 26,000 Jeeps that were produced by Willys before they really dialed in the mass manufacturing had a few unique features. One of them, and most prominently, is this grill, which was steel bars welded together. It also has a few other features like there's no glove box, the gas tank sump is squared off, and a host of other things. I could go into that in its own video, but we'll save that for another day. For now, I want to just focus on this particular vehicle, which was my grandfather's. He bought this in 1960, and it's been in my family ever since. So history on this vehicle is it ended up getting purchased, like I said, by my grandfather in 1960. He knew the guy who owned it, and they would go hunting up in northern Arizona in the mid-50s to late 50s. And the guy that he knew wanted to upgrade and get one of the newer, bigger, wider Jeeps, aka a CJ5. And when he did that, my grandfather, who was in the Army Air Corps in World War II and flew P-38s, he was a flight instructor actually, he wanted to have this Jeep because obviously I assume it, you know, had some fondness to him given the fact that he probably drove many of these during the war. So as soon as he got this in 1960, my dad was 11 at the time, and by that time this Jeep was about 18 years old, so it needed a few things like the generator rebuilt, and the I think the starter needed some work, the carburetor, you know, probably needed to be rebuilt, things like that. So my dad and grandfather kind of went through this vehicle, did some mechanical work to it, and ended up fixing it up and getting it running and driving. One of the interesting things that my dad would always tell me is, as a 11-year-old, 12-year-old, you know, working on this thing, my grandfather would give him a signed list. Okay, I need you to remove the generator. I need you to remove the water pump and things like that. And so my grandpa would go to work and my dad would go and do these things, and he would come back and say, okay, looks like you did this right, you know, go ahead and do this and this and this for tomorrow. So it was kind of a team effort with my grandpa teaching my dad how to work on this vehicle. This is what my dad learned how to drive on, and my aunt and uncle for that matter. And they would take it hunting and fishing and camping and everything up in northern Arizona. Also, you know, my dad would drive this thing, I think during the summer before he went to college. It was kind of his primary vehicle. He even drove it in high school. So, you know, it wasn't like a toy for them. It was just one of their main vehicles that they would use from time to time. And, you know, the kids would get to drive it, you know, while Grandpa got, you know, the primary car, of course. But it was kind of interesting hearing some of the stories that my dad mentioned about the vehicle during its time. And if I can break the history of this vehicle down to, I would say, 3 parts. The first part was, you know, when it was new to when my grandfather bought it. Second part is this period where my grandpa bought it and they used it, you know, for all of the stuff I just mentioned here. And then the third part is, you know, after a while, the vehicle, which by the way was painted yellow, once my grandpa bought it, he wanted to paint it yellow so it was easier to find in the woods. So there you go. But once they drove it for a while, you know, my grandfather got older and my dad was kind of starting his family. And so a few things started happening. The gas tank started getting a little rust in the tank, and it started needing some more repairs after about 15, 20 years. And actually more like 25, early 80s, I would say, is when it's kind of got parked because, you know, as my dad said, you know, I would rebuild the fuel pump, and then you'd drive it a little bit, and then it would just kind of putter out and obviously get, you know, there'd be clogs in the fuel system. So anyway, it ended up getting parked, and a number of years later, we ended up coming over to my grandma and grandpa's house, and I would always see this Jeep in the backyard, and I would play with it and say, Dad, I would love to fix that up one day. I'd like to fix that up one day. So when I was like 11, 12-ish, 13, my dad was like, okay, son, it's time, let's do it. Let's fix this Jeep up. So we brought the Jeep over to our house and started working on it. You know, it was something that was my first vehicle and my first introduction into military vehicles and classic cars in general. You know, as far as the paint and body goes, what we pretty much did is made sure that nothing was peeling, but otherwise painted over all the paint that was there before. It had like a light Forest Service green that was on it when my grandpa bought it. And at this point, it still has a lot of the yellow on the paint underneath. So we obviously painted it this olive drab color to be as close to original as possible. But you know, now that the restoration's getting older, you can start to see some of that yellow coming through, which is kind of a nice little reminder there. So my dad and I went through and did some work on the engine, which I'll talk about in a minute. You know, we went through and rebuilt some stuff on the floor. The hat channels had rusted out, which is obviously a common thing with these. And then it was just pretty much cleaning up all the paint, getting the undercoating off. It had some undercoating on it, and getting everything cleaned up, painted, and kind of put back together. So there's a few things on the inside I'll talk about that we, you know, kind of updated and changed. But as far as that goes, that was done in May of 2004, right when I was kind of graduating high school. So at this point, this restoration is about 20 years old. Actually, it is 20 years old. So I thought it was a good time to make this video and kind of showcase what, you know, what I've been up to in the 20 years that this has been done. And I tell you, it has been a great journey to take this vehicle and have it be a part of my life. As far as driving it around, you know, one thing notable that's coming to mind right now is I had taken it to Southwest Colorado, where there's Ouray, Telluride, Durango, and Silverton, all those nice towns with the mountain passes in between. And we did a number of different trips, like I said, about 3 over this 20 years, where we would take it over those mountain passes. And man, what a fun trip that is. Right now we are in northern Arizona, and I went to school up in northern Arizona in Flagstaff, and I had this up in Flagstaff when I was going to school up there. And it's so nice because in Phoenix, where I'm at right now, a lot of the roads are, what, 45 miles an hour, and people drive 50, 55, which is kind of fast for this. But in a smaller mountain town, you've got 25 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour speed limits, and this is right at home driving those. As far as other things I've been up to in the 20 years that this has been restored, you know, a lot of camping trips. My wife and I got married in 2014, so actually we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary, which is super exciting. And this was actually our wedding car. I asked my wife, I'm like, hey, you know, I have the ability with friends who are into classic cars, and, you know, my dad who has a couple things, like, what would you like as your classic car? And she said, I want the Jeep. So there you go. I guess I picked a good one. So this was our wedding car, and had a lot of fun with that. But since then, we've done camping trips at least once a summer. And we try to, not all the times, but we've tried most times bringing this up, and it's a great part of our camping trips. We, you know, use it on the different 4-wheel drive roads and take it around, have fun with it, put it into 4-low, and you know, make that a huge part of it. And since then, you know, we've had kids, and I tell you, having a nice flat surface to change the diaper of a little baby when you're going camping is a nice place for that. So it's been a great vehicle as we've enjoyed it for that type of aspect. I'm also pretty active in my military vehicle club here in the Phoenix area, where I've done different static displays, different parades, and other things like our annual military vehicle show we put on, having it a part of that and participating with other guys who are into stuff like this is always fun. So it's nice to have 20 years worth of use on this, but let me show you a few things about the vehicle and then we'll take it for a ride. Let's start with the engine. Well, this is the engine bay, and that is the 134 cubic inch 4-cylinder Go Devil engine. But this is a GPW engine, not the original Willys that went in this. This vehicle actually has had this engine in it since my grandfather purchased it. So, while some people who would be looking to do a restoration and get like all the parts right might be looking for a Willys engine, I might just leave it in just because, hey, it's been with this vehicle so long. Let's just keep it rolling, keep a good thing going. So when my dad and I restored this, and kind of a nice thing to think about is when we restored this, just like my grandpa did to my dad, he was like, okay, Alan, well, take this, and this off. And so he'd go to work, and then I'd, do some work on that, get the water pump off, get the radiator out. And so it was my chance to kind of, learn about military vehicles, learn about classic cars, and get excited about all that. But as far as the engine itself goes, we pulled the engine and had it rebuilt because it was just tired and worn out and needed it. So we had all the stuff done that you would want to do when you rebuild an engine like this, which is, plane the head, deck the block, bore the cylinders and turn the crank and everything else. But the cylinders are 60 over when we got it rebuilt. Now they're 80 over. So the guy at the machine shop said, hey, if you want to rebuild this again someday, we'll have to throw sleeves in it, which makes sense. Looking at a few other things, I'm running an Optima battery, which has worked fine. I put these little wood blocks in here to help space it out, and, not an original look to it, but that's all right. As far as the air cleaner, that luckily, when the engine was swapped, was not changed, and that, I believe, is original to this vehicle, which is nice. For those that don't know, the early Slat Grills came with what they call a pancake air filter, which is a little bit different from how the later ones looked. It was more of a canister style, a little narrower and longer look to it. So as far as the carburetor, I'm running Carter WO, which is what these originally came with. Some people run those Solex carburetors, but this is what it was on the vehicle, and it's worked good so far. It took us over Imogene Pass, which was over 12,000 feet, 13,000 feet, I forget. But anyway, it got us there. We had to adjust the idle mixture to, let's see, it would be, I would say, of lean. Yeah, we had to adjust it lean because the air was so thin. We didn't want to flood it. But, it's taken us everywhere we've needed to go and done so beautifully. So, as far as the radiator was in pretty bad shape when I originally got this done, and I bought like a reproduction radiator, which has been in this thing 20 years, and I haven't really had the desire to get a new one, although some of the reproductions they make now look just like the original ones. So if I'm willing to buck up and get an original looking one, I might just do that one day. We'll see. So that's always something that you think about when it comes to, oh, these projects are never done. That's one of the categories of things that is not done. This is a 6-volt system. I know some people change them to 12, but like the carburetor and this aftermarket radiator, it's worked with us so far, so I'm just going to keep rolling with it. Let's take a look at the interior. As we look at the interior, a few things you can spot right away is the lack of a rifle rack, which is common for the early Slat Grill Jeeps, as well as no glove box. What's interesting on these, on this one in particular, my grandpa put a altimeter in the dash, which it had there for years. And so when we restored this, my dad ended up sourcing a P51 Mustang altimeter. So that's what this has been rolling with. It's nice to be able to have this when you go camping and things like that, and you can see where the elevation is. Looking at the dash, all the gauges, I think, with the exception of the oil pressure gauge, are aftermarket or reproduction. Like this is a Stuart Warner gauge for the ammeter. And the speedometer I know it's not a reproduction, it's just an old, taken from some other military vehicle that my grandpa had sitting around, which is what I put in here. But I think that was before they were really reproducing speedometers when I was doing this in the early 2000s. But as far as mileage, I think we've driven this about between 15 and 20,000 miles in the last 20 years. Between all the camping trips and driving around town and parades, driving around neighborhoods, just to take the kids around and stuff. But it's done really good so far. Another thing to point out, the ignition switch, one of the things my grandfather did was he rewired this so that the starter button, which is on the floorboard, is not what you use to start it. It actually has a keyed ignition, and I think that ignition switch is from like an early 50s Chevrolet vehicle. I don't think they reproduce those anymore, but it's nice to have with the little part that protrudes out so you can turn it on without the key locking it. Now the steering column sits kind of a funky way, and that's because the steering box and steering column are from a Hudson. That was apparently a popular thing that people did in the 50s and 60s to a lot of these that had the original Ross steering box. And it was something that my grandpa did to this here. That and a reinforced pitman arm on the front. I haven't taken them off because I feel like putting a Ross steering box would kind of be a step back. So unless I get a bug to really bring this thing back all the original, I might just keep that modification since the goal was to give it better steering. As far as the seats, these seats are reproduction, the actual seat frames themselves. This used to have a station wagon seat in it. When my grandfather purchased it, that's what he'd put in here so that he could fit 3 across. Himself, my grandma, and one of the kids would ride all the way across the front. And, that's something that you would typically see if you had a DJ 3A, or is it a DJ 2A? Some of those DJ Jeeps from the early 60s had that seat all the way across. And I've actually seen, through different forums and stuff, there's been a couple other people who have that type of a station wagon seat across their vehicle as well. As far as the canvas, we got all new canvas when we restored this, but at this point it's kind of showing its age. It's kind of time to refresh this thing. And I might just do that, but we'll see. We'll see how things go. But the canvas, it's good, but after enough years, with enough days outside having fun, it starts to wear out. Let's take a look at the rear of the vehicle. Looking at the back of this vehicle, you can see the Willys stamped into this rear panel, which was something that they did away with after I would say March, April 1942, like all the Slat girls had them, but after the more standardized production run, after the first 26,000, they did away with that. And that was just because the US military didn't want companies to sort of have advertisements for their vehicles on this equipment. Kind of interesting there. As far as the numbers, one of the things that I did when we were restoring this is sanded down the hood and got the hood numbers revealed. Since it hadn't had that done before, I was able to use real fine sandpaper and wet sand it down to where we were able to get the original hood numbers. This I positioned, I wasn't able to find the original numbers on the back, just because at one point this had like 2 spare tires on the back, and was it a spare tire on each side, and jerry cans on the back. It had all sorts of stuff done with it. which is kind of normal for these Jeeps. You know, they weren't really thinking about, oh, what's original, you know, what looks good, type of thing. But as far as the numbers, this is approximately where those were located, and so I just used my stencil that I made. I just basically kind of used a razor blade and cut out the letters. Now there's guys out there in the hobby that make stencils that make it a lot easier of a process, but I didn't have that luxury in the early 2000s when I was making this. But it's nice, and as far as the color, we found a couple areas that had been kind of out of the sun and did a color match. So this is that early Willys green, as close as we could come to it. One of the things this Jeep has is a tow hitch, which is kind of interesting. It says 1955, 1966 Pontiac, which is like a dealer accessory, and I think this was just put on there by, you know, my grandfather, because there was always something that needed to be moved around or towed or things like that. I added the chrome ball because I don't know. I just did. And I'll leave this on here just because, well, you know, we'll see if I need to use it for something. I really haven't used it much, but, you know, it's one of those things. As I was restoring this vehicle, I didn't necessarily want to take it back to square one. I just wanted to have this be sort of a progression in its life, which is why it has so many things that, you know, the common person might think is, you know, non-original, but things that I want to keep on this vehicle. As we move towards the front of the vehicle, you can see this has locking hubs, which was a common thing that was done to these Ford GPWs, Willys MBs, CJ2As, CJ3As, these early Jeeps. And what that does is, the benefit is that it gets you better mileage, and then you're driving down the road a little bit smoother, because when they're free, you're just spinning your wheels and your bearings and not the gears and axle shafts and everything in your front differential, as well as your front drive shaft. All of that is, you know, static, not moving while you're going down the road, unless you lock them and you want to put it in four-wheel drive. Another thing this has, which actually if you look in the book, The All-American Wonder, it has a page on these as well. Some people would, and it was kind of a common thing, but some people would put these latches on the rear part of the hood. The benefit of that is, if you have a hood that's starting to wear out, that channel that's in the back, if after enough dirt roads and bumpy washboardy roads, your, you know, hood starts to vibrate a bunch and wear out in the back there, this kind of holds that in. So it's something I just put back and hadn't, you know, hadn't gone back to the original, because I would have to do some work on the hood, which I didn't before I got this on the road. Here we are 20 years later. But it's funny, there's almost a playbook of things that people would do to these Jeeps, you know, with the hubs and the Hudson steering, as I mentioned, and the station wagon seats. Another thing related to those seats is cutting out the inner fenders and getting those so that you could have more room for the station wagon seats or whatever you're going to put in there. That's something that my grandpa did, and it's funny because I hadn't really figured out how to fix that when I was originally going through this. I saw that and I'm like, man, that's above me. But now, with some of the stuff that I've done recently on some of these projects, I'm looking at them like, oh, well, I would just, you know, cut the piece out and, you know, metalwork this one piece straight, and then butt weld a new piece into this side, and, you know, fold this one piece over, and I'm good to go. So it's funny kind of seeing the progress that I've made over the years when it comes to some of this type of stuff. And again, if I decide I want to go crazy on this vehicle, that might be something that I could fix, or just leave it. You know, I've gone this far without it. But as far as the wheels, you know, the tires, it rained last night before I came out here. So as you can see, we've gone a little mud, which is nice. You know, it's certainly not the first time this has had mud on it. We've been out camping a lot when it has rained, and this is just normal. You just wash it off when you're done, and it'll be fine. But the wheels, I have two of the original solid disc wheels. The other ones are like early CJ Jeep wheels, which, you know, I could replace at some point, but haven't yet. You know, that's all. I have a long list of things I need to do to make this, you know, more accurate, but it's like, you know, you got to weigh having fun with it versus trying to split hairs with some of the, you know, more accurate parts here. But at this point, I think it's time to take this Jeep and go for a ride. Let's do it. You know, when you're driving one of these, there's really two vehicles. There's the neighborhood streets, static display, convoys, parade vehicle, which is tons of fun. But if you haven't taken one of these and put it into four-wheel drive and splashed through some puddles and gone through some mud, you know, you're really missing out, because it's like it's a whole nother vehicle when you put it into low range, four-wheel drive, and get this thing going on dirt roads. I think what I've loved most about the 20 years that I've owned this is the time I've got to spend with it off-road, because you can get on a road that really doesn't have anybody. You can get on a road that doesn't have anybody driving down it, where you're not having to worry about some ATV behind you, and you just cruise, just go, and it's nice. It's like you're going back in time. I really think this is one of the best time machines, because you can hear and smell and feel what it was like for some of our men and women who fought to experience this. You know, a lot of people say the same thing about flying in old warbirds, and I feel like this is an extension of that, without the expensive plane ticket. You know, there was some rain that came through here, so I'm trying to navigate some puddles, but I haven't put it in four-wheel drive once. I put it in low range, but I haven't locked the hubs, and we're just cruising. I've got the top on right now, but it's a lot of fun with the windshield down too. We went camping when our daughter was about a year and a half old, and let me tell you, there's nothing that puts a child to sleep faster or easier than a vehicle like this with all these bumps and the vibration of the engine, just the lull, and she goes right to sleep. I just saw 4 elk, oh 5, 6. That's a big herd. I'm gonna try to grab the camera, see if I can get any pictures of it. Move. That's it for the walk around and drive of our 1942 Willys MB. You know, my grandfather died when I was real young and I never really got to know him. But I feel like over the last 20 years, enjoying this vehicle and spending time with my dad while we've been enjoying this has been a way to kind of connect with him here. So it's great that you were able to spend time with me here. Thanks for watching. And if you're wondering what the future is in terms of videos, this channel, there is a new project on the horizon and I'm excited to share that with you. It's the next one that's going to be dropping, and a little hint about it, it looks a little bit like this one. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.